Have you ever found yourself adrift in a sea of conversation, feeling like a ship from another world, speaking a language no one else seems to comprehend? You offer a pearl of profound insight, a glimpse into the deeper currents of existence, only to be met with vacant stares, a nervous laugh, or a swift, dismissive change of subject back to the shallow, predictable tides of daily gossip. If this resonant ache of solitude feels intimately familiar, as though your very frequency is tuned to a station others cannot hear, then you have arrived at a sacred space of understanding. This is not a sign of your brokenness, but a testament to your awakening. Your journey is unique, and it is divinely ordained. If you feel the truth in these words vibrating within your soul, let your presence be known. Like this message to signal your alignment, subscribe to become a part of this growing tribe of deep thinkers, and affirm your connection in the comments by sharing, "I am not alone," for your light is a beacon for others who feel lost in the same fog. Imagine this all too familiar scene. You are surrounded by people, yet you have never felt more alone. The air is thick with chatter about trivialities, the latest fleeting scandal, the superficial news of the day, a repetitive circular argument that leads nowhere but back to its own empty beginning. It's a storm of noise that offers no shelter, a banquet of words with no nourishment. Within you, a divine spark of curiosity and a yearning for substance stirs. You see the intricate patterns they miss, the deeper questions their conversations carefully avoid. You feel a gentle but persistent pull to elevate the exchange, to introduce a thought that has weight, an analysis that has texture, a perspective that might open a new doorway of perception. You try to join in, not from a place of arrogance, but from a genuine desire to connect on a level that truly matters. But what happens when you offer your truth? What is the response when you present a piece of your soul's understanding? Often, it is a wall of silence. You receive blank stares, as if you've spoken in an ancient, forgotten tongue. The energy in the room shifts uncomfortably. There are quick, awkward changes of subject, a desperate scramble back to the safety of the superficial. Or worse, there is that sinking, heartbreaking feeling that no one note, a single person grasped the essence of what you meant. They heard the words, but they missed the music, the soul frequency behind them. It is in these moments of profound disconnection that an inevitable, chilling conclusion begins to form in the quiet corners of your mind. Maybe it's just better if I stay silent. Maybe this inner world of mine is meant to be a solitary kingdom. If this narrative strikes a chord deep within you, know this: you are not an anomaly, and you are far from being alone in this experience. But the source of this painful schism is not a flaw within you. It is not your fault that you see the world with such breathtaking clarity and depth. The problem, the fundamental truth you must grasp, is that a higher vibration of intellect does not automatically build bridges between souls. It often reveals the vast, seemingly impassable canyons that lie between them. It is a divine paradox. The very gift that allows you to see the universe's intricate tapestry can also be the thing that separates you from those who are content to only see a single thread. The more you understand, the more you perceive the staggering complexity of existence, the harder it becomes to find another soul who sees the same vibrant, multifaceted reality as you do. And do not be fooled into believing this is merely your perception, a trick of a lonely mind. This intellectual solitude is not just a feeling, it is a tangible reality reinforced by the very fabric of our collective consciousness. Society, in its subtle and often unconscious ways, has a tendency to reject those who think differently, those who dare to question the comfortable consensus. It operates on a frequency of conformity, and anyone whose inner broadcast is on a different wavelength can be perceived as static, as a disruption to the established harmony. You are not just imagining the resistance, you are accurately perceiving a fundamental law of social energy. Those who challenge the shared illusions are often met with fear, ridicule, or, most commonly, a quiet but firm exclusion. The great philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, a man who stared into the abyss of human existence with unflinching honesty, understood this brutal truth perhaps better than anyone. He was one of the most stark and insightful philosophers in history, and he proposed a radical, unsettling idea that extreme intelligence is not a gift, but a curse. He saw it not as a key to a happier life, but as a heavy burden that condemns a person to a state of perpetual loneliness. Why? Because the highly intelligent individual is cursed to see beyond the comforting veils and illusions that sustain the daily lives of most people. They see the raw mechanics of the world, stripped of its comforting narratives and convenient falsehoods. According to Schopenhauer, this clarity is an isolating force. It is a solitary watchtower from which you can see the truth, but from which you can also see just how few others are willing to look in the same direction. According to his philosophy, the more you perceive the inherent contradictions of the world, the hypocrisy in our institutions, the illogical nature of our traditions, the vast gap between what people profess to believe and how they actually behave, the more frustrating it becomes to even attempt to explain these truths to those who live their entire lives on the surface. It is like trying to describe the vibrant colors of a sunset to someone born blind. The concepts are simply outside their realm of experience, and any attempt to share them is met with confusion or disbelief. After all, you must understand a fundamental principle of the human condition. Most people do not truly seek the truth. They seek comfort. They crave the safety of their illusions, the warmth of the collective narrative, no matter how flimsy its foundations may be. The truth is often cold, sharp, and profoundly unsettling. It demands courage, and most souls are not yet ready for such a demanding journey. This leads us to a pivotal question, one that may have haunted your quietest moments. If intelligence, this supposed gift, leads inexorably to isolation, what is the way out? How can you possibly live with peace and purpose in a world where it feels like no one else thinks, feels, or perceives with the same intensity as you? How do you navigate a reality that seems designed to misunderstand you? If you have ever felt this profound disconnection, this soul-deep emptiness that comes from the lack of a true intellectual and spiritual exchange, then this message is your divine confirmation. It is a sign that your journey is not a mistake, because perhaps the problem is not your loneliness itself, but what your loneliness reveals about the world around you. Perhaps it is a sacred mirror, reflecting the superficiality of a world that is not yet ready for the depth you carry within you. So, is intelligence a divine gift or a cruel curse? On the surface, the answer seems obvious. It would appear that being more intelligent should make life easier, not harder. You understand complex concepts faster. You can notice subtle patterns and connections that others completely ignore. You have the foresight to avoid common mistakes that trap most people in cycles of suffering. On paper, it is an undeniable advantage. But in the messy, unpredictable reality of human interaction, that very same intelligence, the tool that should be your greatest advantage, often transforms into an invisible wall. It becomes a transparent but impenetrable barrier that separates you from the rest of the world, leaving you on one side with your clarity and everyone else on the other, content in their shared fog of blissful ignorance. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this painful dynamic better than anyone. For him, a superior intellect condemns a person to a unique form of loneliness, not because they are incapable of connection, but because the vast majority of people simply do not want to think deeply. It is not that they are incapable, it is that there is no immediate social advantage in doing so. Why delve into uncomfortable philosophical questions about meaning and purpose? Why question the established dogmas that provide a sense of order and safety? Why see the hypocrisy of the very institutions that society is built upon? If all of this deep thought only brings discomfort and alienation, what is the point? For most, life is simpler, easier, and far more pleasant when they accept the world as it is presented to them, without asking the difficult questions that might shatter their peaceful reality. But you, the deep thinker, can't help it. It is not a choice you make. It is the very nature of your being. Your divine blueprint is wired for analysis and perception. Your mind is always working, always connecting dots, always analyzing the world around you. You are constantly seeing the intricate details that others ignore, the subtle truths that lie just beneath the surface. You notice when people lie, not just to others, but to themselves. You see how they cling desperately to their illusions, simply because it is easier and less painful than facing the raw, unfiltered truth of reality. And you feel the overwhelming frustration of trying to explain something profound, only to realize that no one is truly listening. Not because they disagree with you, but because what you are saying does not fit into the comfortable, pre-packaged narrative they have constructed for themselves. And that is the central, heartbreaking point. Society, as a collective entity, does not value truth. It values conformity. There is an invisible, unspoken structure that keeps everything functioning, a set of shared beliefs and illusions that hold the social fabric together. And this structure depends entirely on people believing in those illusions. The illusion that happiness lies in consumption, the illusion that success is found by following a predefined, socially approved path. The illusion that common sense is always right, and that tradition should never be questioned. Those who dare to question these fundamental premises become a nuisance. They are a loose thread that threatens to unravel the entire tapestry, a piece that simply doesn't fit in the neat, orderly puzzle of social conformity. This explains why, throughout the entirety of human history, the greatest thinkers, the most brilliant minds, have almost always been rejected and ridiculed before they were ever recognized and celebrated. Think of Socrates. He was sentenced to death for the crime of corrupting the youth. But what was his true crime? It was simply asking questions. Questions that exposed the ignorance and hypocrisy of the powerful. Consider Galileo. He was persecuted by the church for stating something that we now know to be an obvious, undeniable fact, that the earth revolves around the sun. His truth was a threat to the established order, and so he was punished for it. Think of Nietzsche, who was ridiculed and considered mad for daring to challenge the very foundations of Christian morality and exposing the contradictions that lay at its heart. Or Nikola Tesla, a visionary genius whose inventions changed the world, yet who died alone and forgotten, while others profited from his brilliance. Do you honestly believe that things are so different today? Technology may have evolved, but has human nature truly changed? We still live in a society that subtly but effectively punishes those who think differently. The rejection may not be as explicit or as violent as it was in the time of the Inquisition, but it still happens every single day, in 1,000 small ways. Today, the punishment is social isolation. It is the persistent, gnawing feeling of being misunderstood. It is the immense difficulty in finding other souls who truly share your worldview and can meet you at your depth. This leads us to the central, most critical question: is the problem inherent in intelligence itself, or is it a reflection of the world that surrounds it? Perhaps the true reason for the isolation of the most intelligent is not a lack of social skills on their part, but rather the uncomfortable fact that for most people, truth is a foreign and unwelcome concept. What you see with such painful clarity, others actively prefer not to see. And this voluntary blindness, this collective refusal to look beyond the superficial, is what creates the vast, lonely barrier between you and the rest of the world. If there is one thing that society fears more than anything else, it is the individual who thinks independently. Most people follow an invisible script, a set of prefabricated ideas and beliefs that they repeat without ever truly questioning them. And that is the real, underlying reason why intelligence does not bring people closer. It drives them away. It acts as a mirror, and no one likes to be confronted with their own limitations. Think about it. When you encounter someone who is physically stronger than you might feel a sense of admiration. When you see someone who is wealthier, you might feel envy, but rarely outright hostility. But when you demonstrate a superior intellect, the reaction is often not one of admiration or envy. It is one of resistance. Why? Because while strength and wealth are external advantages, intelligence exposes something far more personal and sensitive: the limitations of others' own minds. The mere presence of a deep thinker forces people to confront their own cognitive flaws, their own unexamined beliefs, and their own intellectual laziness. And no one likes that. Intelligence acts as a mirror, reflecting what others do not want to see in themselves: how limited their beliefs can be, how superficial their conversations have become, and how much of their lives are spent in a mindless cycle of distraction and conformity. And what does a human being do when they feel uncomfortable? They either attack the source of their discomfort or they ignore it. This explains why the thinker has always been treated as a threat. Schopenhauer understood that society not only rejects those who question its structures, it actively punishes them. He said that the further someone distances themselves from the mediocrity of the masses, the more solitary they become. This is not a choice made out of arrogance, but a consequence of clear sight. Because most people simply do not want to face reality in its raw, unfiltered form. In a world that values comfort and convenience above all else, the truth is often too heavy a burden to bear. And this rejection does not just happen on a grand, intellectual level. It occurs in the small, seemingly insignificant details of everyday life. You make an interesting, nuanced observation, and people look away, their discomfort palpable. You bring a new, challenging point of view to a discussion, and someone quickly and awkwardly changes the subject. You notice patterns of behavior that no one else wants to acknowledge, and you are labeled as negative or complicated. It is a subtle but constant process, a gradual distancing that slowly but surely pushes you to the margins of the social world, simply because you see what others have trained themselves to ignore. But this rejection does not mean you are wrong. On the contrary, it is a divine sign that you are seeing beyond the smokescreen of illusion that keeps most people trapped in their comfortable, predictable realities. And that is precisely why intelligence leads to isolation. It is not because the intelligent choose to be alone, but because the world, in its fear of the truth, instinctively prefers to push them away. If you have ever felt isolated because of your unique way of thinking, you may have realized that this loneliness is not always something that is imposed upon you by others. Often, it is something you choose for yourself. At first, there is a genuine, heartfelt effort to connect. You try to share your ideas, to find someone, anyone, who sees the world in the same way you do. But over time, as these social interactions become consistently frustrating, empty, or simply exhausting, an inevitable conclusion begins to arise from the depths of your soul. Maybe it's better to be alone. Schopenhauer believed that highly intelligent people often prefer solitude, not out of a disdain for society, but out of sheer necessity. He said that for those who think deeply, the world often seems like a superficial spectacle, a grand theater where most people are merely actors pretending to understand things they have never stopped to truly question. Trying to participate in this theater requires an absurd amount of mental and emotional effort, and in the end, the reward is minimal. The price of socialization is often the frustration of engaging in conversations without substance, of participating in interactions where one has to constantly lower their own intellectual frequency just to be understood. And so, the distancing happens. First, you start to consciously avoid certain social circles, because you know, deep down, that your ideas and your true self will not be welcome there. Then, you begin to more carefully select your interactions, seeking out the rare conversations that have some meaning, some depth. And finally, you come to the profound realization that the best company is often your own mind. Not because you disdain others, but because they seem to have nothing to offer you beyond fleeting, meaningless distractions. But here lies the trap. This isolation, which at first seems like a peaceful refuge from a noisy, shallow world, can quickly become a prison. The mind of a thinker never stops. It is always spinning, always analyzing, always questioning. And without someone to exchange ideas with, without intellectual challenges to sharpen your thoughts, your own thinking can become a closed, echoing cycle, where everything makes sense only within the confines of your own perspective. Intelligence can distance you from the ignorance of the world, but it can also trap you in your own bubble of understanding. And that is where loneliness can transform into something deeper and more dangerous, a kind of psychological exile where, even when you are surrounded by people, you do not feel a part of anything. You may even interact, laugh, and talk about trivialities, but deep down, you know that something vital is missing, a true dialogue, a genuine exchange of ideas. The great tragedy of this self-imposed isolation is that it is not a choice in the traditional sense. No one truly wants to be completely alone. But when the world offers only superficiality, when human connections become a burden instead of a pleasure, loneliness can seem like the only logical path. And that is the great irony of the intelligent mind. The more you understand the world, the less place there seems to be for you in it. If intelligence is something so valuable, why does society constantly reject it? Why are those who see beyond the veil so often ridiculed, ignored, or even attacked? The answer is simple. The world is not built for thinkers, it is built for conformists. Society, since its very beginnings, has always favored those who follow the rules, not those who question them. From our earliest days in school, we are trained to obey, not to think. We learn to memorize information without questioning it, to accept ready-made truths without investigating them. The student who asks too many questions is seen as bothersome. The employee who suggests changes to the established system threatens the stability of the company. The citizen who challenges the dominant narrative is treated as a problem. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. He believed that the world was dominated by a system of collective mediocrity, where independent thought was seen as a danger. He said that most people do not want the truth, they want comfort, and the truth is rarely comfortable. This explains why the great thinkers in history were often rejected before they were recognized. Socrates was sentenced to death for challenging the values of Athens. Galileo was persecuted for suggesting the earth was not the center of the universe. Nietzsche was called mad for exposing the contradictions of Christian morality, and even in modern times, revolutionary thinkers are often discredited before being accepted. But this resistance to intelligence is not limited to the great names in philosophy and science. It happens every day, in small, subtle ways. It occurs when you try to have a deep conversation and people look away, impatient. When you suggest a different point of view and are immediately rejected. When you notice patterns that others ignore, and, instead of curiosity, you receive indifference. The truth is that society not only fails to value critical thinking, it actively discourages it. Because people who think too much are not easy to control. They do not blindly accept any narrative. They are not satisfied with simple, easy answers. And this threatens a system that relies on conformity to function. And here lies the greatest paradox of all. Society needs thinkers to evolve, but at the same time, it rejects them. It wants the benefits of intelligence technology, scientific advancements, philosophical innovations, but it does not want to deal with the discomfort that deep thinking inevitably brings. That is why those who see beyond others have always been, and will always be, a minority, a lonely minority, but an essential one. Extreme intelligence not only isolates, it can be a heavy burden to bear. It is not just society's rejection that hurts, but the very effect of deep understanding on the mind. Schopenhauer saw this brutally. The more one understands reality, the harder it becomes to find pleasure in it. Most people live in illusions. They believe there is an intrinsic meaning to life, that there is justice in the world, that effort will always be rewarded. They believe in concepts like destiny, luck, and merit. These ideas keep people motivated, give them a sense of purpose, and make them continue moving forward, even in the face of immense difficulties. But a deep thinker, someone who truly questions these premises, sooner or later arrives at an uncomfortable conclusion. None of this is guaranteed. And this is the fundamental difference between the ordinary person and the thinker. The ordinary person can deceive themselves, and this illusion keeps them happy. The thinker, on the other hand, sees the world as it really is, chaotic, indifferent, and full of contradictions. They realize that morality is not absolute, but a social construct, that the pursuit of happiness is often just a meaningless race after desires programmed by culture, that most people do not seek the truth, only validation for their pre-existing beliefs. And this is where intelligence becomes a weight, because once you see, you can no longer unsee. You cannot simply turn off your mind and pretend that everything makes sense. You cannot return to a state of comfortable ignorance. As Nietzsche wrote, when you look long into an abyss, the abyss also looks into you. This is the price of understanding, a growing disconnection from the world around. While others celebrate small victories, a new car, a promotion at work, a fleeting romance, a thinker wonders, does this really matter? What seems satisfying to most appears superficial to him, and this feeling of displacement grows, little by little, until he feels like a stranger in his own time. It is no wonder that many of the greatest thinkers in history experienced profound melancholy and even depression. Pascal described the infinite silence of the universe as something terrifying. Kierkegaard spoke of the anguish of being an isolated individual. Kafka transformed the feeling of alienation into enduring literature. Schopenhauer, perhaps the most pessimistic of all, saw life as an endless cycle of desires and frustrations, where the only escape was total renunciation. But here lies the big question. If intelligence condemns us to see the truth without illusions, how can we live without being consumed by it? Is there a path between comfortable ignorance and absolute despair? This is the question that separates those who merely suffer from their intelligence from those who learn to use it. And the answer may lie precisely in the acceptance of one's own solitude. If intelligence leads to isolation, and a deep understanding of the world can become a burden, what remains? What can someone who sees beyond the surface do to avoid being consumed by their own mind? Schopenhauer believed that the only way for a thinker to find any kind of peace was to accept their solitude and redirect their energy towards something productive. He argued that intelligent people should not waste their time trying to fit into a society that would never fully understand them. Instead, they should embrace solitude as a privilege, not as a punishment. But this is not an easy answer, because deep down, every human being desires connection. Even the most intellectually independent person wants to be understood, wants to find someone who shares their worldview, who can offer a true, meaningful dialogue. The problem is that these encounters are rare, and expecting society as a whole to value the depth of thought is a mistake. So, what to do? The first thing is to understand that intellectual solitude does not have to mean total social isolation. There are ways to find like-minded minds, whether through books, philosophy, intellectual communities, or even in art. Many of the greatest thinkers in history lived isolated lives, but their ideas transcended their time because they were recorded, discussed, and eventually recognized. The second thing is to direct your intelligence towards something meaningful. A mind that does not find challenges and purpose quickly becomes a trap for itself. Creating, exploring, constantly learning all of this can transform the weight of intelligence into a powerful tool. And lastly, accept that the world will always resist those who think differently. Society never embraced its great thinkers while they were alive. Only later, when their ideas were no longer seen as dangerous, did they become admired. This means that if you feel like you don't fit in, you might be exactly where you should be. But now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt that your way of thinking isolates you? That the people around you simply cannot keep up with your worldview? Leave your comment below and share your experience. And don't stop here. If this video made sense to you, then the next one is essential. Click and keep watching, because this conversation is not over yet.